We are Luke and Kristen Larson, and welcome to the Build a Home Together podcast. This is a marriage podcast for people who want to love their home, not just because of the place that it is, because of the person they share it with. Because you can buy a house, but a home has to be built. And thank you so much for joining us for episode 2. We're so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Luke?
Yeah.
It's really exciting to be recording episode 2. We're learning already so much about what goes into making a podcast and how fun it is just to get responses from you listening. We got great responses from episode 1. Thank you everyone for your comments and for everything that you reached out to us with through text messages, Facebook messages, Instagram, all of that. Thank you guys so much, and we really appreciate you guys checking this out and listening and being a part of this journey with us.
Yeah. So last episode, we talked about contentment. We also shared our story kind of in a nutshell. We've been married for 12 years. We kind of shared our story there. A big section of our story was in Colorado. So we lived out in Colorado for 3.5 years.
Because it's probably the shortest section as of now, but it was like the most transformative section.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so 3.5 years out in Colorado. We moved back, what was it, 7 years ago now? 8 years?
Yeah, it was 2014.
Yeah. So
if you can do math.
Yeah. Right. So 7 years ago.
Somebody tell me.
I got you, baby. So 7 years ago, we moved back from Colorado, and but that was a really transformative time, and we talked about it in our first episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, go check that one out. But we explained how that time was, as far as work goes, which really affects a lot of things, was very difficult for me, and then overall for Kristen was extremely great. It was really awesome season for her. And so we were in very different seasons for almost that whole 3.5 years. And so that was kind of a unique thing for us. And I think we had a hard time recognizing that we were really in different seasons until later, but we'll kind of dig more into that. But one of the questions that we got was to kind of elaborate on that, and how do you go through different seasons and still be together on that. So we knew that this episode was going to be about teammates and what it means to be teammates, and we thought that being in different seasons it's really the perfect way to dig into what it means to be teammates, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, is when you're in different seasons.
Yeah, that's true. That's
right.
A good point.
So this is going to be kind of the soil for our conversation, so to speak.
So Hannah, thank you for that comment.
Yeah. So
that's that question. I really appreciate
Hannah.
it.
And so, so today we're going to be diving into what it means to be each other's teammate. And so Kristen, you asked on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I reached out and I just wanted to ask, what comes to mind when you think of teammates? And I got a couple responses. Donna actually commented as well, and she said her parents own a business together, or they own a business together. And I'm like, I can't, just props to them. Yeah. I'm like, all the different things that we've tried to do together, the level of commitment and communication that you have to have with each other to run a business. That's amazing. So I wanted to give a shout out. Donna, thank you for that comment. And then Hannah reached out to me, and she sent in some really cool, just down practical thoughts on what it means to be a teammate. And I want to read these off to you because I thought it was so good and really just helpful. She said, "My husband shows me he's on my team by standing up for my needs and preferences when we're with other people, and I don't want to speak up for myself and make waves." And I love that. And she also said, "My husband shows me he's on my team by reminding me it's okay to say no to commitments that we both know would be detrimental to my emotional and mental health."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are so good. And she also shared a couple others. She said, "I am a teammate to my husband when I decline volunteering him for things without first talking to him." And another one, she said, "I'm a teammate to my husband when I defend his need for margin in his schedule." And speaking as a guy, she's clearly married. She knows that's an important thing.
Yeah.
And margin for us guys, it's just a hard thing. I think it's a hard thing for everybody, really. But that's a wonderful teammate thing that she said of defending Margin and his schedule and not volunteering him without talking to him.
Because I think, ladies, we've all done that.
Yeah.
Can we be honest? Ladies, let's just raise our hand because
wherever you're at.
Done it. Wherever you're at. Yes.
Yeah, and it's true, but it's and a lot of times it's pretty harmless in a lot of ways too and everything, but it does show love to consider to be considered as a man. It shows love when I'm considered that way too. So I feel that. So thanks, Hannah. Those are awesome responses.
Yeah, and it inspired me to, and Luke as well, to come up with some of our own like that. I love the practical stuff like that. So for me, Luke shows me he's my teammate when he's interested in my work and how my day was. It always means something when I'm working from home. So when he comes home and asks, like, what happened in your day today? Like, what went on? And we get to talk about that. And then another one is, this is super practical, but when he gets up early to help me clean up dog messes, then smiles at me even though he's tired too, because we have dogs and sometimes they just decide in the middle of the night to throw up or poop or something like that. And so, we got to get up and take care of it. So, and then the last one that I wrote down was when he asks for my opinion. So, and this is the sweetest thing ever. So, okay. So Luke we'll be sitting at the table, like having dinner, and Luke will be like, so I'm working on my CNC or something in the garage. This is just recent. He's like, I'm working on my CNC and I'm going to take it down from the place that it's in. I'm going to rehouse it in this other place and this kind of stuff. But I don't know if I want to do this kind of housing or this kind of housing or these kind of options. And so he's talking about it out loud. He's like, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't really know about this stuff. I know kind of, and I can kind of give like ideas of practicality. But anyways, I kind of like asked some questions and we processed through it. And he ended up, this just happened like earlier this week, and he ended up with, he's like, okay, I know what to do now. Thank you, honey. You gave me my idea. And I'm like, okay, great. But I don't know. I love it when you include me in on stuff just that you're doing for fun, and then also stuff that's, a bigger deal. Whenever you ask for my opinion on something, it always means a lot to me.
Oh, it's so fun. I love that. Well, and it's so funny to me too, because I know like when I'm like on that one, when I'm talking about it, I'm like, I know that you don't know about all the details of what I'm saying, but I know that talking to you always helps. So it's just kind of like, I just kind of dive in and hope for the best, and it always works out. So yeah, it's so great. Well, and it's funny too, because I had an idea not too long ago about something I wanted to do with my table saw, and I don't remember what it was, but it was something, I wanted to do something different with my table saw. And as soon as I said it, you said you wouldn't like that. You just told me like last fall that you didn't want to do that because you didn't like it. And I remember, and you wouldn't like that. And I was like, wow, you're totally right. It was so funny.
Teammates.
So even though, even not having the context of like exactly what I was thinking or understanding it even completely, I like hardly got into it, and she knew where I was going because I had already talked about it before.
That's awesome.
I just didn't remember.
I love it.
So yeah, that was hilarious. So I wrote a few too. So the first one I wrote, when she tries to understand what is on my plate, that kind of goes back to the margin thing, like what Hannah said. But when I have a lot going on, and it's hard for me to just recognize it. I'm an internal processor, so I just kind of deal with it, and I process my own way and all that type of stuff. But so she has to look for cues. I make it harder for her, so than she does for me.
You usually have to dig a little bit.
Yeah, so she looks for cues, and but it means a lot to me when she asks me, I have a lot going on. I can tell, but I don't know what it is. Can you help me understand? Or just when it comes up and I'd say that I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm feeling tired, and when she has said that, it's been so helpful. So brought that up and kind of pulled it out of me in that way of like, I didn't know you still had a lot going on. What's going on? That just happened recently.
Today.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. And like, right, today. Well, and yesterday too, we talked some more about it yesterday.
That's right.
Too. So it was kind of a 2-day conversation, but anyways, yeah. So I had a lot going on at work, and I was kind of done with the late night part of this project, doing a lot of late nights, but I was still doing a lot during the day and everything like that too. So, but she kind of pulled that out of me and said, help me understand what's going on and what's taking your bandwidth and everything. So that was so helpful. I loved that. Another one is when she when she helps me to understand my feelings. She and most ladies, I think, are much more experts at sorting through feelings and understanding feelings. Because you have a lot of them.
Ladies, I don't want to make generalizations, but.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Well, and truthfully, we all do. And it's like, I feel like I'm learning more and more how many more emotions that I have than I ever thought I did. But I just, it's, as a guy, it's not normal to express them a lot and things like that too. And at least it hasn't been growing up and everything like that. But it's just kind of, for me anyways, I'm used to shoving it down or just processing internally. And even if I only get kind of halfway through the processing, I call it good enough and I let it go. But things build up over time and things like that too. So but there's times when I'm kind of like, when I'm upset or if I'm overwhelmed or whatever, and I'll come and talk to you. And it's like, I feel better afterwards. And it's because I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm just kind of upset about this and upset about this. And, she might say, well, those are all kind of small things. What's the thing behind it?
Yeah.
And I can kind of help. And I don't know. She just has great questions. So, she has helped me so many times to understand my feelings and what it is that I'm going through. Other awesome thing that she does is she reminds me of the bigger picture when I get tunnel visioned. So sometimes I'll be working on a project or I'll have something that I'm excited about, like, my CNC stuff I've been working on over the past year and a half, and that's been so much fun and I've loved that. But it's like, sometimes I'll get tunnel visioned into that, or I'll get tunnel visioned even into, we put in a privacy fence this spring.
Right.
And that took a lot of hours, but there's also other things in the house that need to be taken care of, and that I don't have to not sleep, not eat, not talk, not do anything until it's done. And sometimes that's what I want to do. So it's like, so I get tunnel vision, and she helps remind me of the bigger picture of, this doesn't have to be finished today.
Right.
This doesn't have to be done today. Like, we need to connect and things like that too. So there's those things, and to me, that's how I feel like I have a teammate, because it's somebody watching my back ultimately.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to phrase it.
Yeah, and it's like, that's really kind of what it comes down to. So if you notice a theme through each of these things, between the all the different examples we just went through, if you notice a theme, it's not getting ahead of each other. It's having each other's back, and not only that, but it's reaching the goal together. Because it'd be really easy to say, okay, we have a goal, we've came up with this goal, or we just generally have this goal, or sometimes you can get arrogant and life will humble you, I promise, but you can you can get arrogant and say, I'm better at marriage than my wife is, or I'm better at marriage than my husband is, and I'm going to live as if I'm married at the level that I think I am at, which you're not if you think that. But like, you can think crazy things like that, or you can think I'm better at this or that, and you can just start running. But it doesn't, that's missing the point. The point is unity. The point is getting to the goal together, you know? So it's like, so doing it right is actually setting down your selfish desires and coming together.
And helping each other
as the goal.
Yeah, I like that.
And helping each other. So
yeah.
So that's kind of that first section. As far as examples, we had talked about those things. So regarding teammates, when we first kind of came up with the word teammate for us and applied it to us, anyways, we were in Colorado. We were in very different seasons, and and the different seasons that we were in was again mostly work related. Mostly work related for me, but it kind of affected my life because I was early 20s. I was, my parents are successful, and I wanted to be successful like them, and I wanted to be, all those type of things, and I had these big dreams, and I felt like I was just stuck in the job that I was at, and there was no hope for change, and I was totally stuck, and I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And I was, so even though it was all kind of surrounding work, I felt like my life hadn't started yet in a way.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And then my season was, I was actually in a job that I was really enjoying. And I also had friends that I was getting to know that I was really enjoying, like really close, deep girlfriends that it was so much fun. And just being out in Colorado, who doesn't love it? Like the hiking, the sights, we were in Fort Collins, so the town, just everything about it was so cool. So I was just having a blast. So those are kind of like our two different, they weren't the same.
Yeah.
Like not polarizing, but like kind of opposite in a way.
Yeah. And we, I mean, and I was in that friends group too, so it's not like
Right,
I didn't
right.
have that necessarily, but it was hard for me to really enjoy that
Right.
as much in a way. And when I felt like this big piece of my life was out of place and
Yep.
not keeping up with my goals and dreams.
Because that was like deep heart stuff and deep desire
was.
stuff that you weren't getting and didn't have any hope for, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately what I've kind of learned years later, and in some way I'm still learning, is that my identity was in my hope for large amounts of success early on and how it kept on going. So it's like, so learning about and continuing to learn even now about how my identity is in Christ and who I am to him and who I am to you. And life doesn't have to look a certain way if we're loving God and loving people and going with that too. So there's a lot of long lessons there, but it's really hard. I mean, I can speak from a guy's perspective. It's really hard as a guy to be early married and have an idea of what your hopes and dreams, and then kind of watching the timeline go in advance without your dreams advancing at the rate that you were hoping,
sense.
or even at all. You know, and so that's what I was feeling. So one of the things we being in that different season in Colorado, we fought and we didn't handle that season well. So So when Hannah asked that, as far as like, how do you be in different seasons and still be close? What we can offer is lessons from not doing that season well.
Yeah.
And we've had other shorter seasons that were not quite as long and everything, that we've kind of learned a little bit more, but we're very much still learning.
Very much still learning.
But and the truth,
so we're going to talk about our mistakes.
Yeah.
And how to not. Maybe you can learn something as we have.
That's what we offer today.
Yeah. We offer here's our mistakes.
Yeah. Mistakes and errors. But we have learned a few things, and we'll share those too and dig into those. But yeah, I mean, like we said, that's where the rubber hits the road, is when you're in different seasons trying to be teammates and trying to work towards the same goal. So that's, so that's kind of what we're in. So being in this time, we were in different seasons. So we fought a lot. We were working through different issues in our communication and everything like that. And we had this especially big fight, and Kristen it was like the next day, and we were still kind of fuming in, whatever, but Kristen had taken a picture of us on our bikes outside, and she put the text on it, said "One team together forever," and she had it printed and framed and brought it back and gave that to me. And that was like the world's best peace offering ever. It was so powerful. And so seeing that word team just has stuck with us ever since.
Yeah.
So that's why we're talking about teammates right now, because we often remind each other, remind ourselves that we're teammates, and what that means to us is that we can have different challenges, we can have different obstacles in front of us, but we're working towards the same goal and goals. And, coming up for 5 years dating and a handful of years married at that point, we hadn't really gone through different seasons that we knew about, really. So it was hard for us to really recognize that we were different people, with different problems.
Yeah.
So that's what this words really has allowed us to do, is we have different challenges, we have different things going on. So one of the things for us where that rubber hit the road was in our different season, is that we'd come home at the end of the day, and that's kind of when the tension would start. That's when whether it was arguments or needing different things or whatever else. So a couple of the mistakes that we kind of did then that we want to share. One of them is that we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about the fact that we were in different seasons and
because that really hadn't occurred to us at that point. You know, I mean, hindsight looking back, and we've learned now we can talk about it, but yeah, we didn't know then. And I think I didn't know. I don't think I really like fully knew or fully cared about what you were going through. Of course I cared, but it wasn't like this deep, like, let's sit down, like, what are you going through? Let me battle this out with you, because I was going through a good time. So I don't think it really even occurred to me that would have been a good thing to do.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting how hindsight really is
2020.
You know, it's crystal clear. But
fellas, ladies.
But back then, yeah, we didn't know that talking about it was important. And it's not like you have to talk about it so much that whoever's up has to ultimately be down.
No.
You know, like
no.
It's not that at all. Like part of being teammates is encouraging each other towards health. And if one person has a lot of health all around, mental, emotional, that should be encouraged and protected and kept as well. But talking about it really is so important. And for me, I didn't speak up about what I was going through. I bottled it up. I, quote unquote, processed it internally, which, is to an extent a very real thing, and then becomes kind of an excuse to bottle things up. And it's like, and that's kind of the edge of the cliff, that's, so to speak, for internal processors like us. So it's like, I bottled it up. I just had a lot inside that I didn't know how to express.
Too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess so.
Well, and there's part of that, like me I didn't want to see that you were in a difficult season of life and work. And of course I knew work was horrible. Like I had a front row seat to that. But just how you handled it, you still showed up. You were still engaged. You still loved me. You still, you know what I mean? So just the fact that you can go through that level of suffering, and that you went through that level of suffering, but you were still so much engaged with me is really incredible. So
that's awesome.
Just to tell you that.
Thank you. That's awesome. Well, and I wanted to be, and I think it's maybe easier to do that in a longer term hard season where as opposed to, say you got $1,000 in the bank and you get hit by something that takes $900 away in an instant, or you can, this is a metaphorical bank, energy, you know what I mean, and bandwidth, but like say you have $1,000 a bank and your balance is declining slowly, that's kind of where I was at. I mean, there was some days that were, things happened, that were especially discouraging and hit me hard. But for the most part, over that time, my balance, my internal, balance of my internal emotional bank account, so to speak, was just in an overall decline. But there is something true that the day to day you can show up a little bit easier, but it's than if you just got fired or something crazy,
right?
Or, if your dreams were just crushed, that's a different thing too. But
yeah.
But anyways, so in hindsight, we would highly suggest talking about it.
Yeah.
And know and understand, just to the point where and understand what each other is facing and going through.
Yeah.
And even if that's really, really good, like we've had shorter seasons now that have been a month or two long, and it's like where they've been, the up and down kind of goes back and forth, but sometimes I've had low seasons again here where they've just lasted a month or so, where Kristen's doing really well, but I've been able to get a lot of encouragement that she's really happy, because it's reminded me that my whole life isn't a mess. It's like I'm able to encourage in that place. So it's not that you have to suck the other person dry, because that's not what teammates is about, but you can be together and unified in that as you encourage each other towards health.
And to just kind of bring it down to a practical, like, know what's going on in each other's work, just as a practical step, like sit down and talk about, like, what are you going through at work? Like what does your day-to-day honestly look like? Because a lot of us probably don't know what the day-to-day of our spouse's work looks like, and like, what are the challenges that you face? What do you like about your job? What do you hate about your job? You know, just kind of to dig in. And then, so about that. And then on just another level too, like, how's your relationship with God? Like, what has God been talking to you about lately? I love having that conversation with Luke. So what has God, you know, talking to you about lately? And like, even about like physical health, like, how are you feeling? You know, like, are you tired? Are you feeling good? Like, can I help out in any way? Or how are chores around the house? Like, how is that going? What's your main problem? What's your main issue? And then again, focus also on the successes, like what's going good. So I think these are just such great conversation starters to really get to the core of what's going on in your life and in your hidden life that I'm not necessarily a part of all the time. And like in the not hidden places in your heart, but like the places that I don't see what's going on, and how can I know what's going on so I can better understand you, which might help me understand why you're acting certain ways, why you're doing certain things, why you're not doing certain things. Just kind of knowing all of that is helpful in becoming a team, and will show you different ways that you can be supportive, and even different like ways you can encourage and come alongside that person. That's just some like very practical ways to kind of start that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so good. Those type of, just being on the same page makes all the difference in the world.
Same page. We say that weekly, at least once a week, like same page.
Yeah, as a
you know,
question.
or like,
and then same page. Yes, okay, same page. Yeah, and,
same team, same page.
Yeah,
like remember.
Yeah,
we really do.
Yeah, it's a good thing as a, you know, once a year check-in, to have a good sit down, or, you know, not any sort of regularity, but really the most important stuff is the weekly, however often you feel like you need to, the little check-ins. Like sometimes we try to systematize things too much, I think, where there's like, okay, we need to have a quarterly check-in on how we're doing in our marriage. And it's like, that's great. That's awesome. Those type of things.
You're those kind of people.
Yeah. Props. Like that's really, really great. But I think just the, you know, it's, I mean, picture yourself on a boat that's starting to rock. You glance at each other. You okay? You okay? We got this. Okay. Like whenever your boat starts to rock, like do a quick check-in with each other. It doesn't have to be like, okay, we're going to go sit down at Starbucks and talk for an hour at that time. It doesn't have to be. It can be, but
it can be.
But just those little check-ins, at least for us, I feel like the same team.
Yeah.
Yes, same team. Okay, that 3-second check-in that happens just whenever it has to.
Yeah.
It's that I would prefer, you know, a few hundred of those throughout the year to quarterly check-ins, at least for us. And I think it's awesome and great.
Well, and even just saying that, like, you good? Same team, same page, whatever. If you're not, then that gives you the opportunity to then have that conversation. Because if you're not on the same team, it's like, well, I think so, but what about this? You know, because that's happened before too. It's like often, same page. It's like, well, I don't know. And then we get on the same page and we have that conversation to kind of dig in and get there. But I like just having that kind of check-in because it opens the door to conversation, which I really like.
Yeah, it can be so helpful. And yeah, so stinking helpful. So one of the other mistakes that I want to share. So for me, who was going through the harder season at that time, I numbed out. And I wanted to stay busy with movies and things like that, and just numbing out and even hanging out with friends, which was fabulous. And we had just an amazing group of friends out there, which was so helpful. And any one of them I could have talked to, and I think I talked a little bit to some of them kind of knew just what I was feeling, but I didn't really get to unload and I didn't. It was my choice, and I didn't. The friends we had out there, any one of them would have been an excellent listening ear. But I preferred to numb out than dig into it, and so that's mistake number B of that we're talking about here. So first one is that we didn't talk about it. Second one is for me as the person in that season, I numbed out. I let my desire for numbing out overtake my drive for health in all the ways, spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, and because I hurt, I didn't want to feel. And I preferred not to feel than to address the hurt. And that's just how it was. So looking back in hindsight, if you are in a hard season right now, or if you have been in a hard season and you're trying to prepare and be ready for the next time, that, because they come and go, and that's just life. But get your rest, but take time to pray, sleep, and eat well. They matter more than everything else that you do. They really do. It's
they do.
Rest is good, and you can
rest is critical.
It's critical. It's super critical. But you can kind of say, I need rest, I need rest, I need rest. And that's what I did a lot of. And it was sleep, and then it was movies, and then it was all kinds of other stuff. And it was ultimately just numbing out. I didn't make time for health. So get your rest for sure. But the rest won't actually do much for you if you're not making some of the healthy decisions to take time to pray. Prayer is critical. And sleep is critical. Eating well is critical. Doing those things to take care of yourself.
Getting physically active.
Yeah, those type of things. And it might not seem like it makes much of a difference, but one of the things that we've talked about for health, we've talked about it more for time in the Word, is that faithfulness is for now, fruitfulness comes later. And what that means is it's not a vending machine. Health isn't a vending machine. Time in the Word is not a vending machine.
Wow.
It's tilling and cultivating and planting soil in your soil. So it's this make enough of the right decisions so that you can actually reap the harvest that you want.
That's good.
And faithfulness is now, fruitfulness is for later. And then be so grateful when that fruit comes, and it's when that harvest comes. It's so stinking amazing to see life start to grow and harvest out of what you've planted in the hard seasons, and in the good seasons, and in the hard seasons, and in the good seasons, as life cycles like that. If you continue to plant, you will continue to harvest. So yeah, those are a couple of our mistakes. We also, there's a few things that we know now that we didn't know then.
Yeah.
And
So this is another hindsight thing.
Yeah,
So hindsight.
Yeah, hindsight. Hindsight's 2020.
Hindsight.
There is I feel like hindsight could be the good name for just a general podcast that that talks about all kinds of mistakes and say hindsight.
That would be good. That would be a deep but really funny. So somebody out there, if you want to make this podcast, call it Hindsight, we'll probably listen.
Yeah. Hindsight. I should not have made a super soaker flamethrower.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe not been a good idea.
Oh my gosh. Let's not talk about that. Luke Larson. So, one of the hindsight things that will maybe help you, if this applies to you, is it's important to try to characteristikize the bad season. No, you take it. Yeah. Characterize?
Yeah. Characteristicatize. Yeah. So this is one thing that we found is super important is trying to characterize the bad season. And it's really, this is the case for who's going for the good season too. It's basically just take an assessment, and try to understand it better. Because for me, I was having a lot of trouble with work and the things around it. But community, relationships was great.
Yeah.
Finances were stable. They were okay, and
they were stable.
Yeah, like we weren't in critical condition there or anything like that. But we, there was parts of life that were good, and I couldn't see it. So the thing is trying to characterize the bad season. So is this a bad month? Is this a bad year? Is there a known end date at all? Is it just in one life category or multiple life categories, like relational, health, work, family, finances? It could be that your finances are an absolute mess, but everything is actually flourishing, and that finances being a mess it's painful. So that can affect everything, and that can affect your view of everything. But if you can recognize that this one area is in bad shape, but the other ones are actually good, that can help give you strength, and you can...
And give you clarity on how to then make decisions and just focus your mentals
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at those different buckets, the different life categories, are any of those categories in a good season, be grateful for that, because
Yeah,
that's so. I mean,
that's
it's
so good.
it can be such a blessing when
Mhm.
when you feel like everything's bad, and then suddenly you realize, like, man, actually, marriage is fantastic right now.
Mhm.
You know, work is terrible, finances are terrible, and my health is not good, but we are closer than we've ever been. Man, what a blessing. And you can be
Mhm.
grateful for that. And, and that can go a number of different ways, but it's so powerful to recognize what you can be grateful for in those
Mhm.
times.
Yeah, one friend once told us that it was kind of always flip flop for them. They were either great financially and they were then not great relationally with each other, or they'd be great relationally with each other and then they weren't great financially. So for
Mm-hmm.
them, it always seemed like it was one or the other. They were either
Mm-hmm.
having problems in one area or the other. And so that's just good to be, aware of
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah, we had another friend who's married couple they had 3 kids, and they said, looking back on their marriage, that they could always remember either kind of facing some sort of financial obstacle or some sort of relational obstacle, whether that's in marriage or even if them united as a team, but with family or with other people that are
Sure.
important to them and stuff. And it's like, but I mean, that's the thing. We are not in a perfect world as much as we'd like to be.
There's always going to be problems.
There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be a battle,
Yeah.
and it's important to recognize that and accept it.
Mm-hmm. True.
It's so important. So, so kind of looking at some of those things: bad month, bad year. Is there a known end date? What life category is it in? Also, I think a really important question is this season self-inflicted? And that can be a really hard question
Because
to
those
ask.
happen. As
They
much
do.
as we don't want to admit it, they happen.
Yep. And that could be everything from I mean, we have some examples we'll share too,
Yes.
but I know somebody who is working out a drug addiction, and he's made all his own bad choices, and he has put himself in a terrible, terrible place and continued to get second chances from people who love him, and he works them for a little bit, and then he manipulates and goes south. But he happens to be on a really awesome upward swing that has a lot more hope behind it right now, and it's so amazing to see. And but the thing is, it took him recognizing that all of what was going wrong in his life was his own fault to really come out of that. So asking that question, is the season self-inflicted, is so critical, because there's and then there's 2 kinds of self-inflicted. You can have kind of a self-inflicted bad season by choice, aka church is in a desperate place. They need a youth pastor. I am able to fill the role just on weekends until they hire somebody else. I talked to my wife. We're on the same page. This is going to be difficult, but
this
we're going
is
to do
an
it.
example. This isn't what we're doing.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
to clarify.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. This is an example. Yeah. But that, for example, is a self-inflicted by choice. You're on the same team. It's still hard.
It's still going to be hard. Yeah.
There's a specific way to handle that, because you encourage each other towards pursuing and continuing, as opposed to stop the bad decisions that you're making. you know, so that's a different type of thing that you can for self-inflicted by choice. That's really its own thing, as opposed to self-inflicted by mistake or bad decision.
Another self-inflicted by choice just example was with you, Luke, recently with work, with the opportunity coming up to work late, for, was it 2 weeks? Just kind of sporadic
roughly,
days here and there for a couple weeks on this big construction project. So
I don't do construction for work. I work at an engineering manufacturing company, but we were taking over 1,000 squeet of more, 1,000 squeet.
Yes.
That was awesome.
1,000 squeet.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm not usually the one who says that. Who has the errors?
Funny when that happens,
isn't it?
Okay, sorry. Continue.
1,000 square feet of extra space at work to extend our production department, and I do a lot of construction-y stuff, and I have since I was a kid, just as a hobby, and so I had the skills to really make a difference there, and so so yeah, we talked about it. I chose and said, hey, I'm going to dig in and stay some late nights and do some extra stuff during my day at work and juggle my normal job. And in it too, it's going to take some bandwidth. It's going to take some late nights, but it's going to save the company a ton of money. It's going to be a great opportunity to get this done faster because contractors are so hard to find right now and who are available. And so that was a self-inflicted by choice.
And it was difficult. It has been hard. And, you know, other stuff had to fall to the wayside, you know, to make space for that. And, but yeah, we were on the same page. We knew it was going to happen. And yeah, so I love those examples.
Yeah, definitely. And then by mistake too. I mean, there's, so you've had diet stuff just, you know, over the last handful of years come up that you've had to work through, and you've done marvelous.
Thank you.
With between grains and gluten and dairy, that's a lot of things that you can't have.
Yeah.
And so like there's been times where suddenly you're feeling terrible, and we look back and try to think about what we had. Did we have anything new? And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this because food allergies are so prevalent now too.
They are.
But certainly we find some ingredient in something that we had 4 days ago had this thing that she can't have.
Had a rice concentrate.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Turns out.
Took me out for days.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just, and so that's self-inflicted, but that's by mistake. So,
yeah.
So, you know, the way you'd handle that is similar to what you would handle self-inflicted by choice, I think, because it's, okay, I love you. How can I help? What do you need? How can I serve you and make this easier for you? Because I know it's hard for you. And that's how you do that. Self-inflicted by bad decision. That's where you need to hold the mirror up and say, I made a bad decision and it's a hard season and now I'm complaining about it.
Yep.
Like when I've done that type of thing, what I need you to do is hold the mirror up. And when you've done that type of thing, that's what I've done, held the mirror up.
Yep. And that actually happened to us this week or it was this week or last week?
Last week. Yeah.
It was last week. Yeah. So we went to a friend's house and I intentionally ate some things that do not sit well with my body because I thought maybe they would this time. And, you know, the reaction sometimes isn't as bad and maybe this would be a good time. And I wanted it and it tasted good and, you know, so I decided just to go for it. I was actually feeling really good and then feeling like excited and impulsive and extroverted with my friends. And then the next several days, it didn't sit well with me. And I was pretty miserable. I was actually pretty miserable to be around. I wasn't fun to be around. And Luke finally told me, he's like, it's really hard for me. He's like, I just want you to know that it's really hard for me okay, hold on, stop. Let me just rephrase this. It's hard for you to deal with the ramifications of when you eat that, but I want you to know it's also hard for me because, and I so appreciate that he held up that mirror and told me that it was affecting him as well, because as far as I could see, I was just dealing with my stupid choice. But knowing that it affected him that way as well, I'm like, I'm never doing that again. Because finally knowing for sure that my just stupid decision then affects him as well. And then it takes several days for us to recover and get back to normal again. Like, I don't want to deal with that anymore. So I just appreciated the way that you held up that mirror and just told me this is affecting me too. And it's really hard. And I'd honestly prefer you not to do that anymore, you know? So yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, it's a hard one too. Cause it's like what I was actually feeling was, you know, it's hard for me to give you any sort of patience or grace.
Yeah.
Because you got yourself here.
Because I did that to myself.
And so it's not my fault. I shouldn't have to deal with the ramifications too. So that's what I was actually feeling. And it took some work because I didn't feel like that was the right thing to say. That wasn't the teammate thing. So saying it's hard for me to have grace and telling her that it's hard for me to have grace, hard for me to have patience when you got yourself here. But I want to help you get out. And I'm here. And so trying to be available, but but being fully honest. I think that's something that has taken me the longest time to learn, because I always felt like I've had to mediate my own and filter my own words to whatever the midpoint is. And what I mean by that is, in this type of situation, historically, I would have said, what can I do to help? And I would have just kind of skipped to the end, but she wouldn't have known how it affects me.
Yep.
And so,
I wouldn't have changed in the future.
Yeah. And we've been there lots of times where there's things that I, if I had only said them, a number of years ago, it makes all the difference. So it's, I think, being fully honest, but then even if somebody's in a self-inflicted season coming behind them can be so helpful. And that's a generalization. I mean, it's really take it case by case, but it's important to be each other's teammates no matter what,
And sometimes being the best teammate is saying, this thing that you're doing is taking us down over and over again, and we're not getting anywhere, and say it in love. Luke is really good at that. I say it sometimes more bluntly, and then I have to apologize. But yeah, just sometimes being the best teammate, and what showing love is saying, this is destructive. This isn't helpful for either of us. But then saying, what can we do? What do you think?
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So good. So I think one of the great things, we kind of mentioned this before, but recognize that seasons change, and they don't necessarily change in sync with your spouses.
That's true.
There's no consideration of your seasons and your spouse's seasons. They don't consider each other. They're not aware of each other. So they go up and down differently. Sometimes they're in sync. Sometimes they're not. Ultimately, they are not in sync. They just
Which praise God for.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Because, sometimes they are. Like, when you're both up, it's awesome. When you're both down, that's a really hard place. It's helpful when there's at least one person up to keep a level head, and encourage the other towards health and be empathetic, and I don't know.
And this isn't just, in a large part, they go up and down together, especially when it's considering, your shared financial and one of your health, like if one of you is actually having a major health concern, it's hard for the other one to be in a great season for sure.
That's true. That's a good point.
There's pieces there too that certainly they are in sync in certain ways, but talking about things with work, talking about things with maybe the smaller ups and downs of life that aren't life or death, but they are there nonetheless, and you still want to be teammates with each other. That is a real thing. So recognizing their seasons change, there's good and there's bad. Like sitting here right now, we happen to be in a really good season right now, and we've had some stuff we've had to deal with, but that's like, I think life's grown us a little bit to be tougher to handle some of the smaller waves and things like that, I think too. And praise God for that too. And it's like, but we happen to be in a pretty good place right now, but we're not under an illusion that it's just going to stay this way. And we're aware that it's so, and I think that is helpful, looking ahead and saying it won't necessarily stay this way all the time, but that it brings us to the mat to pray and everything. And but the thing is,
this is where these tools are so helpful too, to look back on, and just to be aware of and
employ them while you are strong. Like that is so helpful too. So it's a part of life. Adapt to it. Adapting it's one of the most critical, important tools of life, and it's certainly one of the most critical, important tools of marriage.
Yeah, and this is where, it's just a huge encouragement to pray and spend time with God, just because, there's no way we could talk about all the different kinds of seasons and when they might happen and how they might coincide with each other, because life is just, it's so messy, it's so complicated, it's so beautiful, it's so complex, but it's just where prayer and doing this with God is where he's the only one who knows the intricacies of your specific situation. So this is where you can get tools from listening to podcasts like this, listening to other podcasts, reading books, but it's God who knows your deepest, most intricate, complicated situation, who knows your marriage inside and out, who knows your spouse inside out. And and it's the Holy Spirit that's going to be able to give you that wisdom to navigate it in the way that you need to, and to know what tools you need to apply. Because one thing that was so helpful for me, so my dad was diagnosed with cancer in 2018, I think it was. So a few years ago now, and he had lymphoma, and for a while we thought that he wasn't going to make it. He was so critically ill before he even got a diagnosis that we just didn't know. It was so bad. And I remember that God was just who I went to in desperation. So on my drives into work, I would squeeze my hand. I would make this fist and squeeze it, but I wasn't making a fist out of anger. I was clinging to Jesus's hand. I'm like, God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen, but Jesus, I would just cry on the way into work and hold his hand, because I knew that he understood. And so I think that is just know that he understands. And that just like went deep, but it's so good. And then even to take scripture and look at scriptures that aren't even necessarily like specifically aimed towards marriage, and learn how to apply them to your marriage. Like, one is Colossians 3:13, which says, "Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others." Like, and in that verse, it's make allowance for each other's faults. And Luke, you had some really good comments on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to kind of that internal bank account, so to speak, but you can kind of look at a marriage bank account, or like what you have available for your spouse. If you've made an allowance, what that means is that they can make mistakes, and it doesn't take you from $1 to $0, and suddenly you have nothing, and you have to wreck the whole world about it. Like, if you have an allowance there, that means they can make some mistakes, and you can continue to love them without pointing them out and shaming them for it and all that type of stuff. But if there's a bank account there that can take a withdrawal sometimes, and that can be built back up, that's what forgiveness looks like.
Yeah.
And
it's also understanding that you are a human and you're going to have faults. So I'm going to allow it, because that's who we are.
Yeah, and that's how somebody flourishes too. I mean, you see these movies about like, I mean, there's a lot of chick flicks out there, even about
chick
like
flicks.
Yeah, I like chick flicks. I'm not afraid to say it. But there's a lot of those out there, even that where the relationship that they came out of, and this woman was absolutely stifled, and she couldn't do anything right, and she was completely over controlled and everything. And then she found this guy who just doted on her and loved her like crazy. And I mean, they paint the clear difference. It's like, we all know what it is, but it's still easy for us to have a short fuse. And
especially with our spouse,
because we know everything about your spouse more than everybody else does. So when they make a mistake that you could see coming from a mile away, because they made the same mistake a million times, and they just whatever. And it's like, the reality is you've made your own same mistakes a million times too. So give some grace, and you'll get grace back, Yeah,
that's good.
And be teammates with each other. Make allowance for each other's faults. It makes a world of difference. And that applies outside of marriage too, in relationships and all that type of stuff. This is how we have more peace. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And another good thing, just to do. Yeah. So pray, go to the mat for God's help, love your neighbor as yourself, make allowances, and accept help too. I have a couple of close friends that I will go to, and they'll help me. They'll just help me get a better perspective and accept help through people, through podcasts, through books. Like, we don't know it all. Like, let's just be honest. We don't know it all. And
AKA you don't know it all.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Not
Yeah. I'm not
like
saying us on this podcast.
us on this. Yeah. Like
Newsflash.
you listening. You don't know it all. This
Yeah,
is like
I don't
recognize
know
that.
it all.
Let's say that because it's true. And if you think it's not, just wait a little bit.
Yeah.
You'll learn and find out. So having help, accepting help is so important.
Definitely. And then just going back to what we talked about a little bit ago, like remind yourself and each other that you are teammates and do it often. Like I would like you guys to try that. Like just remind your spouse that you're on their side, that you're teammates. And if your spouse listens to this as well, like maybe you guys can do that often. And if you do, and that helps you, like let us know. We would love to know if that actually helps.
Yeah, definitely.
As
Yeah,
it's helped for us.
yeah. Shoot us an email or write it in comments or something like that. We'd love to know if these things are helpful. So one of the things that we found really, really helpful, and maybe not everybody's this way, maybe most people are this way, I have no idea, so let us know. But one thing that we found extremely helpful is to actually know what your goals are. So we talked about when you're a teammate, you can have different challenges in different seasons, be in different places, but you have the same goal and you're working towards that together. So by definition, it's helpful to know what that goal is.
Yeah.
Right. So so what are your goals? So the things that we have talked about, the things that
our goals.
What our goal, and there's kind of permanent or long-term goals that are always there, or there for a very long time. But I would call permanent one category, and then temporary or short-term goals another category.
That's good.
So one of our permanent goals is unity in our marriage, and building a home. That phrase, the whole namesake for this podcast, is we know what that means. And so when Chris and I talk about build a home, we know the intricacies of what that means because we went through our hard season time where we went through counseling. In our time leading up to that, or years leading up to that, there was nothing but tension in the home, and we could only hurt each other no matter how hard we tried to do anything different. And coming out of that season and using scripture as a base and foundation, and trusting the Lord with everything, which we would say that we did before too, but
that's also a growing process.
But that's also a journey and a growing process. So we know what building a home means. That's a long-term goal of ours, is to consistently be putting Christ at the center, using his word, using him as a foundation in our marriage, and growing a home where we are teammates, where we are content, we're grateful, we're following after the heart of Jesus. So to us, that's what that means. We know that that's one of our goals. If something comes at us that threatens that, we know it. We know that we're not going after the goal. And
yeah, and then one of our more short-term temporary goals is no more house projects this summer. So we tend to go from project to project to project, and we are in just burnout where we can't stomach another project. We need to spend time actually enjoying our home now instead of constantly trying to fix it up. So I could see that it was just starting to really like eat away on Luke and really start to, get at him. And I couldn't do it either. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I don't have the bandwidth anymore. So we need a break. So we decided together we are taking a break for the rest of the summer. I claimed October until October. So we'll see how that goes. But we'll see how that goes. October is the thing. We're not doing any more projects. We're doing maintenance on our house because you have to be responsible. So, and there's little things here and there, but we're not taking on any other big projects. We're going to focus on more things that bring us life, like community, hanging out with our friends, hanging out with our family, just enjoying our house, just sitting out in our porch and enjoying it and reading a book, So that's an example of one of our short-term goals.
Yeah. And the funny thing about building a project or projects that we've almost kind of learned that those we kind of only have the one arrow in our quiver, so to speak, as far as how do we fill our time when we're bored?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we just, let's do a project, and we kind
They're
of
fun.
go to that. They're super fun. We love that, but it's good to kind of diversify that a little bit, and, get a little bit better at going out and meeting new people and stuff like that. That's, doing things that, go play Frisbee, go do different things.
Mhm.
So anyways, that's kind of where we're trying to stretch ourselves a little bit. So another short-term goal, build back savings. We had to buy a new vehicle, and then my truck needs some repairs this next week here that
We need to
we're
spay our
digging
puppy.
into, and spay our dog, our puppy that we got. So so there's some things there. We want to build back our savings after some of those things. Exercise and diet goals, that's kind of an ongoing rolling, but still we have short-term goals of what we want to hit.
Permanent and short term. That's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, so that one's kind of there. Self-care, that kind of practically goes back to the projects one, at least most practically right now, but ongoing, there's kind of we're both go-getters, I guess, in a way, and we both have a tendency to push ourselves too hard.
Yes.
And run ourselves dry, and then we get to a point where we're like, I'm beaten, exhausted, and I don't know how I got here. And then we do one of those good, talk to each other, and then we uncover and realize, oh, it's the same thing I always did. How did I not know?
Yeah, and one thing that I recently learned about myself is that I'm a workaholic, and I need to work, like, not with my job.
Yeah.
Like, with my job, like, I'll work hard at my job, but I'm a workaholic in the terms of, like, I'll do my job, and then as soon as I'm off work, I am doing things, like always. And so that the kind of self-care is like, okay, workaholism is never good. So, and having that constant level of stress in my body is not good. So that kind of self-care kind of plays into that for me personally right now, in learning to, let some things go. And for me, reading books is my life. And so, not my life, but I really like it. And so, so self-care for me, I did this today a little bit, was, just sitting on the couch and reading and letting the other things go for a little bit. So that's just an example.
Yeah. And so self-care, exercise, and diet, those are overall, that phrasing is vague and generic enough where it's an ongoing rolling thing, but make some specific goals too there. And that's a helpful thing. And
that's good.
And so, I want to lose this many pounds because I feel like I need to, or I want to learn how to get back to portions, I like my portion sizes tend to grow because I like food. So there's things like that. Make some specifics, because that's helpful too. But in all of that we just talked about over the last hour, remember that a goal that we all have is unity with our spouse. Don't forget that one. Don't let that go by the wayside. Don't sacrifice unity for your spouse in order to build back your savings or no more projects this summer. Don't sacrifice unity with your spouse with your other goals that you have. Make sure that you keep that as one of the main things, along with unity with Christ and pursuing and praying and spending time in the Word. That is foundational. And then after that, unity with your spouse. Don't give up those things for your other goals. So just like that needs to be stated, and keep that in mind as you navigate whatever season you find yourself in, because that's always the question. It's like we said, hindsight is 20/20, and we are, with these conversations, we could spend hours and hours and hours with you based on what we've learned, and we could go back to our past selves, even somehow time travel back to our past selves, and we still wouldn't do it perfectly.
Yeah.
So the reality is, you're navigating the wilderness with flashlights sometimes, and sometimes without. But what you have is God's Word. You have Him lighting your path on the most important things, and leading you along the way, because His Spirit leads you with your peace in His peace, and you have a teammate. So if you can learn how to be teammates with each other and make that a priority, and even ask each other, what does it look like for me to be a teammate to you? And how do I support you in whatever season you find yourself in? And that is so good. So Yeah, that I want to hit that as a reminder on the end. Unity
really
with our
good.
spouse is so critical. Time in the Word, unity with Christ is so critical. Make sure to keep those things front and center as you develop your other permanent and temporary goals.
It's really good.
So, as I said at the beginning, as Kristen said at the beginning, I didn't say it this time. You can buy a house, but a home has to be built. The only thing that time can teach you, however, is that building a home together is more about building together than about the home itself. So thank you so much, you guys. This is our episode 2, the wrap up for that. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, we appreciate it. If you know of one person, even just one person, who could benefit from this conversation, who is asking some of these type of questions and wants to hear some people open up about their lives and the mistakes they made, and some of the things they maybe learned through it. If you know one person, would you share this with them and send it to them specifically? It's so helpful and so good to have a personal friend say, I care about you. I think this might be helpful. And finally, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any more that you heard here that you would like us to elaborate on, or any other ideas that you would like us to do an episode on or to touch on, write it in the comments below and stick it in the comments, write us a message, anything like that. We thank you so much, and we love that you're here, love that you're listening, and we'll see you next time.